Hi, this is Erin Kiger from EduCoaching Partner, and we are here today for our third and final Back to School series, Back to School micro webinar. Today, we're talking about student engagement. We're going to be talking about three elements, right? Compliance, engagement, and reflection. And we're going to talk about ways that we can build in that engagement within your day-to-day. And then we're going to talk about 4 different ways that you can bring in that engagement piece in your classroom on a day-to-day basis. Let's dive in. So the first thing is compliance. Most of us, when we think about compliance, when we think about student engagement, actually, we envision a compliant student sitting at the desk, working, having a conversation, but very structured, very quiet, very compliant. They are getting the task done. And while, yes, you have to follow directions in order to be engaged, you need to know what you're doing. Compliance doesn't necessarily equal engagement. So it's just something to keep in mind when you are observing your students, when you're seeing a classroom that is quiet and everybody is heads down writing, that may or may not be engaged, but it is definitely compliant, which, depending on the situation, may or may not be what your students need in order to be actively engaged and excited in what they're learning about. Engagement is being actively engaged in their learning. They have a voice, there's some choices, there's conversation, there's questions, there's understanding, there's not understanding, and it's all happening because the students want to learn. They have a desire and an excitement to learn about what you are trying to teach them. Okay, you definitely want that compliant piece because there's an element of that, right? You are doing what I'm asking, but to sort of get to that piece, we have to do the dirty work first. And so understand that if you come into a classroom that is loud and messy and there's a lot of laughter and a lot of questions, that is probably engagement. So don't just dismiss it as struggling classroom management. Really key in and ask those questions about what it is they're doing to make sure that you understand, is this engagement? And then reflection. So reflection is that third component. We've got voice, we've got choice, we've got actively engaged in excitement and asking questions. But if you take all of that and then you're done and you move on, you've missed such a critical piece of student engagement, right? Because the whole purpose of student engagement is to have them excited and learning, excited about their learning, right? And that learning doesn't just stop. It needs to be solidified. It needs to have closure. And to get that, to really continue to move forward and build on that, you need to reflect. You need to constantly be reflecting. So to ask your students, what did you learn today, is a great question. But that's remembering, that's not reflecting. What we want to do is we want to keep that engagement going. We want to find out what were you really excited about learning today? Or what was something that you really struggled with understanding today? If there was a partner in class that could help you work through something, who would it be and what would it be? Use reflection as a way to leverage your understanding of what your students' strengths and weaknesses might be and how you can use that to leverage your instruction. Because if you understand what they're excited about or what they're not excited about, then you can use that for your instruction to further support them and further engage them. So don't forget that reflection piece. And while the memory part of it is great, really dive deeper, really use it to understand your students and their processing of the instruction. All right, so now let's talk about ways to keep your students engaged. Movement. Movement is one of my go-tos, and it's great because it can be absolutely used for instructional purposes. Like let's have you doing parts to remember. Let's have you physically moving in order to remember concepts, okay? You can absolutely do that. That's fantastic, especially with younger grades, right? But don't take it away just because they get older doesn't mean that you take those pieces away. Absolutely keep those going. Okay, but you can also keep movement going, keep engagement going because what you do is when you build movement into routines, then you're removing those antsy wiggles. Okay, you take that out and then they're able to focus just a little bit more. And again, littles all the way up through the bigs. You take the wiggles out, you give them purposeful movement where they can also focus, and it's going to help them stay engaged with the instruction, with the content, with the activity, all of those pieces. So that could look, we're here, we're just going to move to this side of the room. Or it can be like, time for a mental break. Let's all go get a drink of water and then come back. Or it could be, let's move from here to go get we're going to put this book back in our desks or in our backpack. We're going to get this book and we're going to come back. So we're staying in the same place, but we're giving them that transition time, that movement to be able to get that wiggle out and then refocus. So don't forget to get them up and moving as often as you can. Interactions. So this is a great place to build in those movements as well, getting the kids up and talking to their peers. And the reason that this is so critical for engagement is because it's a lot less threatening to have a conversation, to share answers, to ask questions, to misunderstand concepts with your peers, a small individual or small group of your peers, than it is in the whole class setting. If I give a wrong answer to the whole group, that is a lot of pressure. And there are some kids who do not want that pressure. Whereas if I'm one-on-one and I'm just talking with a friend, then I can say, I really don't understand this. And they can explain it, or they can come to the teacher, any of those things. But it's so low stakes that your chances of getting them engaged and willing to ask for help are much greater, much greater. So partner them up, have them having discussions, have them doing small group discussions, you can even do virtual interactions. Okay, it may or may not be a whole group in that kind of setting, but it's going to be more memorable. They're going to be more engaged if they are having a conversation with somebody over Zoom, an expert over Zoom, a biologist, a chemist, an astronaut, any of those like really amazing career fields. Bring those people in, bring those folks in to really get students excited about what it is they're going to be learning, really engaged with their learning. Embracing failure and celebrating growth. So I put this because what I want to point out is that we all really try to build classroom communities in which failing or being incorrect is okay. It's safe. We're learning and we're growing together. That's totally fine. But what we want to be aware of is we can embrace failure, but then we want to make sure that we're not just celebrating correct. So if you answer something incorrectly and then somebody else answers it correctly, then we're celebrating that person. And while we've said, it's okay, don't worry, you got it wrong, no big deal, we're really giving those accolades and that celebration to the person who got it right. So that makes this incorrect answer sting just a little bit more. So rather than celebrating the correct answer, what we want to do is we want to go back and we want to embrace that failure. We want to say, help me understand your thought process. Where did you come up with that answer? Let's talk through this. And maybe that's something that you do right then for everybody, depending on the student. Maybe it's something that you do one-on-one, okay? But then after you've talked through that, you understand where they were coming from and you can validate that. Right? And then you talk through the correct answer to help them understand. And then what you do is you celebrate that growth. You celebrate, thank you for explaining your thought process to me. I absolutely understand where you were coming from. Do you understand where I was coming from with this explanation for this answer? Right? I'm so glad we problem solved this together. And now we understand what each answer represents essentially. Okay, so you want to celebrate the growth after you've embraced that failure. Okay, you can always celebrate correct answers and understanding. Absolutely. But if we're in a spot where there's been a failure, instead of just hopping over and celebrating that correct answer, what we want to do is we want to guide that student. And that is going to ensure engagement, because now they know that you are invested in really helping them understand and really lifting them up. All right. I think this may be the fastest micro webinar that we've had. So our last piece of engagement really has to do with digging deep into that relationship with with your students. And everybody says, you got to build relationships, you got to build relationships, you got to build relationships. And it's absolutely true. There is no lies there, right? But what I want to make sure that you're aware of, regardless of whether you're teaching 2-year-olds, 18-year-olds, 25-year-olds, doesn't matter. We all have an inner child, and it's important to recognize the child. It's important to recognize who they are as a person, what they don't know, and then guide them through the process of learning, guide them through the process of growing as a human and as a student. If you don't focus on the human first, then the student is not going to be everything that you hoped, and that love of learning may not blossom. So see the child within the student. Nurture the child for the love of learning, because it's the child that is so excited to learn about new things. It is the child that is the student. So support them. All right. Well, I want to say thank you so much for joining us for all 3 of our back to school series micro webinars. And don't worry, it's not over. This is not by any means the last one. I hope these have been helpful. Remember, only 15 minutes. The idea is to get you exposed and get you thinking about certain things that you can do in your classroom. It is by no means all the answers or extensive answers or even micro answers. Just some things to think about. My name is Erin Kiger. I am EduCoaching Partner. And if you have any questions, please, all you have to do is reach out. Thank you so much.